My name is Kelly Fullman, and welcome to Be the Hero, where I interview some of my most favorite heroes that I have met in my life. I have been blessed with so many opportunities to meet heroes throughout my personal and professional career. And I try to interview as many of those heroes as possible because at some point in time, they've had to become their very own hero and rescue themselves. And that then allowed them to become other people's heroes as well. So I'm very, very excited to have Cheryl English here with me today to talk about vulnerability and really kind of dive into what's going on in the world today and how can we help each other move forward together. So Cheryl, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and how you and I met.
Oh my gosh. I had to think. I am originally from Los Angeles, California. I moved to Denton, Texas in 2002.
Okay.
And I'm a realtor. I was a realtor in California for 14 years. And I'm a realtor. I've been a realtor since I got here. I started in 2003 and got my license. And so I am a local realtor in the DFW area. Um,
Pretty
and
popular from what I hear.
Well, this is true. But also, I think the popularity comes from my community engagement.
It does.
I initially just started out, well, not just, but a PTA mom, and was quickly asked to join PTA Council, which is over all the PTAs. And then I ran for school board a couple of times. And although I came close, I did not win the seat, but that did not deter me from being active. If I couldn't be on the school board um, as a trustee, then I was on every committee, just, you know. And that led to more committees and more boards and things of that, and things that you're passionate about. And because I'm also a commissioner for the Housing Authority here in Denver. So I have some behind the scene things going on, so that's probably where the popularity came from. But you and I met, I want to say it was Teen Impact, but I don't know, I kind of felt like we met before.
I think you.
No, we did.
We did because Jeremy, my husband, was a loan officer.
Right.
In the area.
I met Jeremy first.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I met Jeremy
probably before me and Jeremy were together.
I was gonna say when I met Jeremy, I don't even think he was married.
He was a player.
But let me just tell you, Jeremy was working at Countrywide across the street from where I was working, and we went to lunch, and he had this truck.
Mm-hmm. The blue truck.
and he was like, and I was like, dude. First of all, I can't get in the truck. Okay. It was so high up off the ground. And so when he came to pick me up, he literally bought like a stepping stool so I could get in the truck. I don't know how he got in and out, but Yeah. But and then I remember meeting you. We were at a realtor function, and he was still in mortgages. And then was he in Iron Guardians?
Yeah, he was in Iron Guardians.
Okay, so the motorcycle club, he was in, my friends were in, and then I started coming to Teen Impact at the jail, and then the rest is history.
That was it.
Yeah.
And then we figure out, as I start getting to know all of Denton, I mentioned Cheryl, and they're like, I know Cheryl. I know Cheryl. It's funny how it's a small world.
It is,
and it's amazing to see folks volunteer in the community, because we talk about volunteering and how important it is to be able to get involved and but it's so difficult as a mom, as someone that's a realtor, as someone that's trying to make a living, a single mom too, to try to get involved in our community.
Well, I wasn't single at the time, but at some point I became single.
But still, it's still difficult even as a mom.
Because I had 3 kids.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're all active.
Exactly.
And they're all involved. And they're, all over the place.
Right.
So you want to be there too, but then...
Yeah, it's hard.
It is hard.
But, I think with kids, sometimes that helps you. Because I think with my son... that was the catalyst, in getting active and involved. And like I said, one door opened, another door opened, and then you find yourself passionate about the things that matter to you.
Yeah.
Which help you I think pursue your purpose.
And that's a big one. We talk about pursuing your purpose and we talk about what that is. And, all of us are either trying to figure that out or where we are, or we know what it is. It's just we don't know how to get there.
I think what happens is over time we're trying to figure out what it is, and we evolve into it because it's one of those things like, okay, God, what do you want me to do?
Right.
And then you get in an area and you become so passionate about it. It was like Teen Impact. We were passionate about making a difference in the kids' lives. We were passionate about getting them back on the right track because they may have had some problems, and I truly believe kids just don't arbitrarily wake up one day and decide, I'm gonna act out, I'm gonna be bad. There's something, and we found a lot of that.
We did.
We found a lot of the underlying problems that kids had that caused the reaction.
Yeah.
And I think it was even more. It was even better when we had the girls that would visit from who had just gotten out of teen prison, and the boys at the halfway house, so that they could relate to their peers.
And you saw their story.
And we saw their stories.
Their story, which leads me into our subject today, is vulnerability.
Right.
And these teens and us have to get truly vulnerable with each other, us with them, them with us, and that trust has to be built in 4 or 5 hours, which is sometimes difficult with some.
Yeah, because remember, sometimes we would leave after like a really hard night and something would happen, or we'd have a kid and we were just in tears and we were drained. And but it took some instances, it took some prying, because I think there were many instances where we found out that the reason the kid is like this because the parent is like this,
right?
But they were being vulnerable, and it's risky.
It is.
And I think that as we go through a life as adults, I think that our experiences, hurts, rejections,
it does.
Disappointments, they build that wall, and whether it's business, whether it's relationships, and it takes a lot, but everything is relational.
It is.
It really, really is. And you have to be vulnerable with yourself, but you have to be vulnerable with other people to be able to get where you gotta go. And sometimes that is so difficult.
Well, I mean, your brain and your body wants to protect you. I mean, it's kind of like that protection mechanism in your brain. It's like, okay, the fear of the rejection, the fear of, are they going to judge me? The fear of are they not going to talk to me anymore? Or they're not going to be my friends anymore?
Right.
That fear is always in the back of your head.
Yeah.
But I mean, I still have trouble. And with the vulnerability thing.
Yeah.
It took me forever to trust my husband, and we were 10 years into our marriage because of some of the stuff that has happened to me, to trust a man.
Yeah.
Then on top of that, trusting female friends. Because it was difficult. I mean, you and I have talked about this in the past. It's difficult to find female friends that don't go back behind your back and start, sassing about you somewhere else. So being vulnerable is difficult. And then here we are in the bigger picture about what's going on with our nation and racism and trying to figure out how can we help and how can we move forward together. I think vulnerability is going to be a huge part of that.
Right.
And not just vulnerability, but asking the questions and being prepared to get the answers, and maybe not like what you hear, and then shush.
Yeah, and I think with this particular, in this instance, where a lot of us who have experienced racism, who've lived through that, and live it every day, the narrative is a little different for us.
It is.
And for some people, now is what you see an uprising of people who've seen this atrocity that happened in broad daylight, brings awareness. But at the same time, it's like, you said, okay, well, what are the questions? Okay. And for me, it's like, okay, after we get through marching and you know, and we're angry, as we all should be.
Mm-hmm.
What's the plan?
Right.
Where do we want to go?
Right.
And in there's some vulnerability on both sides,
Right.
because for some people this is really hard to hear,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really it's hard to see,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hard to fathom that, are you serious, this really happens, like, you know, and it's hard to face, because this is a long background of these atrocities happening in America.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're very hard realities, but there'll be vulnerability on both sides.
Yeah, and I think, you know, my husband had a true vulnerable conversation with our neighbor Trevor down the road, and he says hi, by the way.
Oh, come on.
And you know, my husband is a tall, blonde-haired, green-eyed white guy. I mean, I how do you explain it? You know,
Right.
Cowboy hat, cowboy boots, you know, you name it.
Big old truck.
Big old truck. You name it, that's Jeremy. So there are some experiences he will never have, and that my son will never have. And Tuesday, it was a vulnerable conversation with Trevor, who is a really good neighbor of ours. We consider a friend.
Yeah.
And he got really vulnerable with Jeremy, which shocked the ever living daylight outside of his wife, Kia, because he had never seen him be that raw and that honest before. And he got a little upset, and I was sitting there just boo-hooing, and Jeremy got really quiet, and I was really proud because Jeremy listened. And Trevor was safe enough and felt safe enough and felt loved enough to have that conversation with Jeremy. And how important is that right now, to feel safe to be able to be vulnerable with someone right now, especially a non-Black person that has never experienced racism? I've experienced other types of, you know, being a female, being blonde,
right,
you know, whatever, but
right,
not just walking out because of the color of my skin.
Right.
So how does that love and caring and that safe space to be vulnerable, how important is that?
Well, it said a lot about Jeremy's character, just to be acceptance enough to embrace his friend who was in pain. And it says a lot about Trevor, because he trusted Jeremy enough to be able to know that, you know, not even that you're thinking it, because we've all been crying. This is hard.
It's hard.
This is very hard. That he trusted Jeremy enough to know that this was a safe place. And that, you know, just like when we have women friends that we think are our friends, that I'm in a safe enough place that I can do this, and I won't be judged, and my feelings won't be pushed aside.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because a lot of us, what I'm finding with my own personal experience, I was having a conversation with a classmate of mine, and we went to junior high school together. Now, in Los Angeles, in the inner city, what I didn't realize at the time, and then I went and looked it up, in 1976, there was legislation talking about integrating schools in the San Fernando Valley. So we were bused to the valley, where we were not wanted. Right. And so I said to him, you know, because I kept thinking about it, and I said, do you remember when we first started going, you know, when we were first bused, do you remember they wrote "Go Home Nigger" on the wall? And he said, yeah. I said, what else do you remember? And he talked about the parents were trying to get at us, and so they pushed them in a room so that they didn't. I said, you remember them throwing rocks at the bus? He said, yeah. And the parents running after the bus. We remember the police. I said, you remember the helicopters? Because there were race wars
there.
Right. Now, mind you, we were in the 7th grade. That's 12, 13 years old.
And that's a lot to take in
as
a 7th grader, because there's all kinds of other crap going on as a teenager at that age.
I mean, forget the fact that we got to be at the bus stop at 6:20 in the morning.
And then drive, an hour and a half?
An hour and a half to the valley, and not want to be there. And so...
And then other people not want you to
Right. But what I realized for me, as we were having this dialogue, is that I had never told my mother what was happening. And I said, "Did you ever tell your parents?" And he said, he didn't tell his mom until he was an adult.
Wow.
And I started thinking, well, I never had that conversation with my mom, and she's now deceased. And so when I called my dad to talk, my dad was in the military, so he was overseas. So he didn't know any of this. But we held on to that. And and when I was having that conversation
there
with
goes that
him,
wall. There's one more brick.
I was having that conversation, and he said, "This is probably the first time you've talked about it." And actually, it was.
Wow.
Because we have been conditioned as Black people. We got to keep going. And when you're working in corporate and all this, you got to put on this face and just act like everything is okay, but it is not.
Yeah.
Because if you go to work and try to express how you feel about these things to people who that is not their world, that is not their reality, that's being vulnerable, and you may not get the reaction that you need to have.
Yeah.
But it takes a toll on your mental psyche after a while, and I think that's what you see when you see this outpouring of just, "Are you serious?" I think that's what you see a lot of.
It's hurt. It's anger. It's the wall. I think it's the walls finally coming down. It's the I'm done. We have social media now to be able to showcase some things, but then we also have social media that can just keep hitting you one after another.
Yeah.
And especially in one direction.
Yeah.
Some of the negativity coming from, some non-Black people, and then, you've got negativity coming from all, and you're just like, oh my gosh.
It's everywhere. Yeah.
It can be a lot. And I don't think, it's funny because you and I had that same conversation, and I, in Beaumont, where I'm originally from, I was the opposite of the integration.
Yeah, your story was even that. Just when we had that conversation, I said, "Oh, she gets it, but it's just on the other end."
I was on the other end. So I was bused, from the west end to the south end of Beaumont to go to Odom Middle School.
Okay.
And so the kids, integration, so they took those kids and bused them to the west end to the school that I would have gone to, because they do the little
lottery or however they do,
whatever they did. And so 6th grade, tall white girl, lanky, arms and everything, walking in to a school where they're looking at me like,
"Who are you?"
Right.
Yeah.
Why are you here? Who are you? And I didn't understand. I'm 6th grade.
Yeah.
I'm young. I'm freckled,
around that same
time. And, I didn't understand. And it took a whole year of trust and vulnerable conversations, and even a couple of fist fights. I got into a couple of fights, toe to toe. And one of the girls ended up becoming my best friend.
But see, by the time you had got there in 6th grade and had that experience, those girls from birth to the 5th grade had already been having these experiences.
Yes.
And so
I
they
didn't understand.
Yeah. I mean, who
does?
That's really not the reality. I mean, that's not a conversation you would be having with Reese.
I'm not. It's not. It's not a conversation. I'm going to say the minute you walk out in this neighborhood.
Right.
You're a white boy, blonde hair, blue eyed. Nobody's going to worry about you.
Right.
Riding your bicycle up and down, going to the pool by yourself. But when you're with one of your friends, like Thomas, like Mason, like anyone.
Right.
The
narrative changes.
Yeah. That's when I worry.
Yeah.
And it's not a conversation. And that's what Trevor was telling Jeremy about. He was like, while y'all are sitting there working on your car, you're talking to Reese about not speeding and how unsafe it is. I'm having to have a whole different conversation with my sons. And Jeremy, I think finally the wheels started turning. I started understanding when I was in middle school.
Right.
And I was taught at an early age, which changed my whole perspective.
Yeah. But at the same time, that's not everybody's experience.
Right.
And at the same time, even though you had that looking at you, because you're a white girl, we wouldn't be able to know that was your story.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so you are allowed to have the same privilege as people who wouldn't know your story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a huge difference.
It is a huge difference. It's the worst thing that people think about me when I hop out of my vet is they think I got a sugar daddy. But they didn't think I stole it.
Yeah.
They didn't think I don't own it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They didn't think I was a drug dealer.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah. That's a huge difference. I have a friend who's a dentist in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
He was driving. He lives in a nice neighborhood and driving through the neighborhood in his Mercedes. He gets pulled over, and this is like, well, how come that can't be? How come?
Why can't I not?
Right.
Why can I not own a nice car?
Yeah.
Why can't I want that and get it and not be pulled over just for having a nice car?
Right.
Yeah. I think those are the conversations that a lot of people need to start having in their heads, but it's so difficult. Why do you think it's so difficult? I have a thought on why it's so difficult. Why do you think it's so difficult for us to sit down and have these vulnerable conversations? Besides the feelings and the judgment, do you think it's the years of hurt?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And mistrust.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think we can gain that trust back? Because this is something that my non-Black friends are asking. How can we get this trust back? What can we do to get the trust back so we can sit down and have a safe place to have these conversations?
I think, when you're talking about it in a friendship type of way, just like in any it's all relational.
Yeah.
And you have to you kind of have to prove yourself. Just like, you wouldn't let anybody just walk in off the street and be your friend.
Right.
We meet a lot of people,
right,
but not everybody has our best intentions.
Mm-hmm.
Whether, it's your girlfriend, whether she's Black or white or, whoever. For me, if you're dating, it's just like, let me call my cop friends. Let me be the detective. Let me
background
start.
check,
Yeah, let me
stalk
get.
you
Yeah,
on
let me start checking you out. And I think that there have been so many instances that people have wanted to with white people.
Mm-hmm.
And just didn't. I will say this. I'm fortunate because my mother, and this is how I brought up my kids. My mom, even though we were Black, my mom had friends who were different ethnicities.
Mm-hmm.
And we would go to a Jewish festival, or we would go to somebody who was Hispanic or whatever. So you have that, you're introduced to different cultures, which makes you a little bit more well-rounded. And as you start to understand different cultures and what is acceptable and what is not, I think that helps the conversation.
Agreed.
You know what I'm saying?
Agreed.
And I try to do that with my kids because my kids, of course, because honestly, that's the world we live in.
Right.
That is the world we live in. And so, and whether you like it or not, these are the people you have to interact with on a daily basis. And it doesn't mean that you have to change who you are. But I think there's some understanding on both sides.
There has to be. I think that's why I love our football family so much with Lynn and Dee and Mario and Coach Tez, because there was such a diverse group of folks there that we go to Coach Mario's birthday party. We go to Tez's birthday party. We go to Dee's birthday party. And we get to experience all different types of culture. And I want my son exposed to that. I want him to learn and understand what's acceptable and what real love is and what real friends are. And it doesn't matter what color you are. You're still going to see it because it's beautiful. The skin, how can you say you don't see it? Because it's just gorgeous. But it's what comes out of your mouth and how you treat people.
Well, for sure. But you got to also remember that everybody doesn't live in such a diverse area like we do. And, when they go to the football coach's house or what have you, it's just, it's in the same community.
Right.
And these are the same people that they see.
Every day.
So when they come out of that community and they have to deal on another basis with people who don't look like them, that's being vulnerable. And they're not sure about that. And so there's a wall that, And I don't really know, I don't know how to fix that.
I don't either.
You know, I don't. I do have friends because I am involved in a lot of things and sit on boards and have access to people that the normal person wouldn't. That I've been in the grocery store with one of my friends and I said, "Oh, that's so and this is who they are. Let me introduce you." And she's like, "No, that's okay. I don't want to meet them."
Really?
It's just not.
Because she's been hurt.
Yeah, it's not comfortable. And so when you know, whether you've been hurt on the job or you feel that someone has tried to come against you in an oppressive manner, then that's that guard again. We got a lot of work to do.
So much work. And you talked about trust. And trust takes years. Years. It takes 2 seconds to lose it, and it takes years.
Well, look how many years it took to distrust.
Right. I mean, it's a. I think the raw, rough conversations are happening now, which I'm glad. But like you said, what are we gonna do next? Now we're talking. Now we're angry. Now we're pissed. Now we're bringing things out, and I think it's having those conversations. But then I also think, and I'm moving into a direction where this is what I learned when I worked with Disney, is rewarding good behavior. Because we're not rewarding good behavior. We see it in corporate America. We see it in the police departments. We see it in the world with our kids. We're rewarding bad behavior.
So let me just say this. You brought up a good point, the police department. So, you know, we know a lot of police.
And
awesome.
They're amazing.
But it takes one bad officer's behavior, and everybody has a negative view on police. That's how it is with black people.
Wow. There's a wow. I couldn't. I don't even know what to say.
Yeah.
It makes me sad.
Yeah.
Because I had a good friend of mine, Cynthia, black woman, beautiful. She worked for me at Ogle. She walked in and she has this power in her, just this absolute power. And she has her hair braid, and she always looks like a queen. And she said, "Kelly," she goes, "you were the first white woman that I have ever met that I felt comfortable being me." She goes, and she's from Chicago. She goes, and that's huge. And she goes, with these braids, she goes, I never walk into an interview with these braids. I always have to change my physical appearance to be able to get the job I want. And I was like, are you kidding? She said, yeah.
I sit in a lot of rooms with people who don't look like me. Sometimes I'm the only person who doesn't look like me. And I come with a voice and an opinion. And sometimes in those rooms, those people don't like it. And they say things, there's an attack, but it's a little sly.
Yeah.
And for some people, they wouldn't be able to handle that. That would be touching an old wound. And then they shy away and don't want to be involved. But I'm going to stand toe-to-toe with you, especially on something I believe in. And we just going to have to agree to disagree. But to say that I haven't been in some meetings where I got my feelings hurt would just be totally a lie. And I have. And I've had to, have real conversations with some friends and say, well, I'm not going back to that. And their response is, but you're the only one who looks like us in that room. We don't know how to do certain things. And you have the opportunity to get to know. So it becomes a bigger responsibility.
Which is a huge weight on your shoulders. Yeah. But that's a great point. I mean, you've got your foot in the door. You're in the room. You're at the table. Some people may not like it that much, but you're there at the table.
Right.
That's a great point. So you're in the room, you're at the table, you get your feelings hurt, and you got to keep going back, which is kind of difficult.
It is very difficult.
And then it's difficult to trust again. So
Mhm.
there goes the wall.
Yeah,
There goes
because
one
it's
more
like,
brick.
oh, okay, I'll go back in the room. But you?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah. I got you.
I got you.
Mm-hmm.
I see you.
Yeah. It's sad because I know working for a company like Disney and diversity is something that we talk about, diversity and inclusion, and I've already done a podcast about that. But you know, I talked with Cynthia and I talked with Crystal about diversity and inclusion in the workplace, and we honestly all feel like it's just a check mark.
I was just getting ready to say that.
Check. We've got the, you know, the meetings, we've got the diversity inclusion, you know, CFO of
Well,
whatever.
you know, here's the thing.
But are we truly diverse?
Well, I've noticed a lot of statements that have come out by large corporations that, first of all, said there's no room for racism in our company and this, that, and others.
So have you looked at your board?
And I was going to say, okay, well, but I need to see who's on your board.
Uh-huh.
Let me see. And I'm not, when I say diversity, I'm not just talking about a white woman.
Right. Right.
Okay. You know, but then I had to check myself. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, so are some of this stuff you're involved in, did they pick you to be the chosen one? Because mm-hmm. now I got to reevaluate. Mm-hmm. Okay, am I here for a purpose? Am I really bringing you
the checkbox?
Right. Mm-hmm. Am I bringing you value and being an asset here? Or is this a check mark to say, okay, we got one and she has influence and she's popular and people know her, and then they might think, but she's not quiet. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I'm really looking at that because, you know, I work for quite a few real estate companies, and so some of them are putting out messages, and then it's like, well, but I see some of your realtors online mm-hmm. doing the absolute most. And don't get me wrong, you can't babysit people. We're independent contractors, so people can have their own opinions and things of that nature. But let me see your board. Mm-hmm. Let me see how many franchises that you have that belong to minorities. Because I know a different story. But it sounds good.
It sounds good. It sounds awesome, and that's what we talk about is it's okay, check, but they don't want you to have an opinion. And they don't want you to have some insight. And that's the whole point of diversity is getting the different insight from the different experiences.
Yeah, because how can we really be well-rounded on just one insight?
Right.
It takes a whole... Look at this nation. Is not just one people. It's a melting pot of people who come from different places and different backgrounds to make, things what they are.
And we talk and we do the research all the time.
Right.
The research is there that a more diverse group, a more diverse and truly included organization.
Keyword truly.
Truly included is the most profitable, has the most, new ideas or new inventions or new thoughts or new experiences, has some of the best communication, has some of the best customer experience because of the true diversity and inclusion, because you're getting from all walks of life their experiences, because they're like, and you allow them to have a voice. That's the important thing, is you allow them to have a voice, and not just the voice of, okay, we're going to listen to her just to make her happy. We're truly going to take what she has to say.
And not just the voice of, okay, we got everybody on our side to say and do and think like us. No. That's not even fair.
That's groupthink. Don't we learn that like first thing in college about how bad groupthink is?
You know, the greatest thing about when I went back to college, after my kids had all graduated high school, I went back to finish what I started many years ago. I still got a couple more classes, but I'm almost there. But what was great is, at first I was a little intimidated because now I'm sitting in classes with kids who went to school with my kids.
Yeah. They're like, Miss Cheryl.
Okay. And yeah, they knew me too. But it was good to get their ideas and how they were thinking and some of the stuff that I didn't know. And it truly keeps you young.
Yeah, it does.
But it was like, I like to hear the voices, but we were all relatable to each other. They didn't really consider me the mama of the group, even though I had kids their age. But I brought some experience and some wisdom and what have you that they may not otherwise have had, and support, but they brought a lot to me as well.
And we get closed off to the millennials, and we get closed off to the boomers, and we get closed off to all. So we start literally segregating by age, by race, by religion, by, it's like all of us are like, well, the millennials have these bad traits and these bad traits. Honestly, I learned a lot from millennials.
No, they don't.
I learned from millennials?
I got 3.
Have a side hustle. Don't depend on corporate America. Always have a side hustle. Have something there that is going to help you find your purpose.
Right. Which
is
I've always had a side hustle, right, because my mother always had a side hustle. Yeah. Okay. But I was talking to an economist at a housing convention that I see I get this emails every day, but we get to talk, and he talked about these millennials who are doing things different now, and they call them giggers. They don't want to go into corporate America and work a job 30 years, right, or whatever. They're doing different jobs and experiences so that they can find, they're not committed. No. When we graduated from high school,
that was the point.
Get a job and stay on it 30 years and retire. And that was the mindset that I had, because when I left out of high school, I was immediately working in aerospace. At 17, I was working at TRW Space and Defense. I would have, in my senior year, I had my 4 classes, and then I would go to work. Wow. And so I worked there for 8 years after I graduated, and it was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And so I worked a little stint in entertainment, and then I went into property management. Commercial property management and development.
That's where the real estate came from.
No. Real estate, my mother had retired from her job as a financial social worker. And after she divorced from my dad, real estate was her second career. And what happened is I, saw her doing it, and she was very successful. But I told her, girl, I would not do this job. These people calling at 5 o'clock in the morning.
They're calling at 8 o'clock.
And but she was passionate about helping people. And so what happened, I, for a little while, worked in the office with her, because the receptionist got her license, and I came in and answered the phone and had an absolute ball. And they kept saying, you should get your license. I said, oh, I would never do this.
Never say that.
Okay. But it was like fun. And what happened is, while I was there sitting at that front desk, I would do work for other agents. That was my side hustle. So I was getting paid, but I had little contract stuff going on. Well, when I left there was a building that I passed every day that did, property management. And one day I was like, I wonder what they do. And I called to see if they were hiring, and they had just had an opening. So I interviewed.
Oh my God.
I know. So I interviewed, I got hired, and I was the only black, well, actually I was the only black there, and the only black female, and they didn't have any female property managers either. And I collected the checks, did the banking, and typed leases and all that. I assisted the property managers. And I told the owner that I wanted to be, and it was a big company. It was growing, but it was a family company. So I told him I want to be a property manager. And he said, get your real estate license. And I said, okay. So I got my real estate license, and the day I passed, I came and I told him that I passed. And he said, congratulations, what are you going to do with it? He totally negated what I said, didn't even acknowledge it, like I never said it. And I thought, okay. Because that was never his intention, to let me be a property manager for his company. So what happened is I started doing real estate part time, and I worked right down the street from my real estate office. So I would go there. Well,
Smart.
after I got married, I had my son. I felt horribly guilty because it was like I could have been doing this and I
Mhm.
could have been a stay at home mom or
Mhm.
whatever. But my friend said, I think your voice is too big. God didn't want you to be a stay at home mom.
No.
But, um, and so I was doing real estate part time. Well, after I got my first commission check, which was way bigger than my paycheck,
Mm-hmm.
I said, oh, I could do this. I
All
could.
day.
So by the time I had my daughter, I had complications with my pregnancy. I had thyroid issues, and I just had
Mm-hmm.
my thyroid
Mm-hmm.
removed. Didn't know it at the time. Um, the doctor, I'm having all these complications, and I'm emotional, and just your thyroid
Your thyroid
controls your
controls
whole
everything.
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 Okay,
And then your emotions are already whacked because you had a
right,
kiddo.
right, and I had the vice president. My boss was an ex LAPD officer that worked in South Central LA. So his narrative of me was the strong, angry black woman. And he was, picking at me, and, he was a little harder on me than he was on the other ones. And so, anyway, I remember going home and I was emotional and I was crying. And my doctor, my endocrinologist said, let me take you off work because your thyroid is out of whack. And there are people who've lost their jobs because they cursed out their boss.
Right.
And I could have been there.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure.
And I was almost there. And so.
But instead of sitting down with you and finding out
what's wrong,
he automatically judged you because of your skin color that you were the angry black woman.
He had done that from day one.
Wow.
Yeah, and thrown, little comments. And so it was like, you're not LAPD.
Mm-mm.
And so they took me off work, and some kind of way, it's a whole long story, but long story short, they terminated me while I was on disability. Mm-hmm. And I went on to have my daughter, but that pushed me into real estate full time, which was something I had prayed for anyway.
Right.
I just didn't think it was going to go down like that.
We never do we?
No.
Because
that was not.
We're praying for the pretty red box from God, and what happens? We get a blue one, or we get a pink one, or we get a purple one with a different type of bow,
Mm-hmm.
and we're like, oh, that's not what we prayed for. That's not how we wanted that box delivered.
Yeah, mm-hmm. But it was like, what the same, what you were praying for in the box, is in there, yeah. And it was like, yeah, I prayed to, be able to do my own bit, but I didn't think it was going to go down like that.
Right.
And I remember I had a friend of mine, and I've always had older women in my life, mother figures and friends that are older than me. And she had come here from Trinidad with 5 kids, and she was doing real estate, and our stories were just a tad bit similar, but she was like a mother
Mm-hmm.
figure. And I called her and I was like, this is what happened, and I'm upset. And she said, good. And I was like, what?
What good?
Wait, what? Are you
You're
crazy?
supposed to be mad with me.
And she opened my eyes to so much bigger opportunity that I could do now.
Mm-hmm.
And I never looked back.
And here you are.
Mm-hmm.
Tearing things up here in Denton, Texas. So have you ever had an opportunity or felt like you were valued anywhere?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
How did that feel?
Valued or devalued?
Valued. When you were finally valued, like when you finally got into a space where someone truly listened to you, not just because you have a voice, it's because they truly wanted your insight and they wanted to utilize that insight to help make change. Have you ever had that opportunity?
Mm-hmm. I did.
How few times?
I get it a lot, actually. Yeah, because I sit on boards. But again, that's relational.
Right.
And you have to establish yourself. So I will say that
How many doors got slammed in your face at first?
I didn't have a lot of doors. Let me tell you what happened. An interesting story. Because sometimes we have our limiting beliefs.
Mm.
And that in itself, talk about vulnerability. You have to learn how to be vulnerable to yourself.
Okay. That's a good one.
And I had come from Los Angeles, and I had a diverse clientele of clients whose houses I sold or sold them houses.
And LA had already gone through quite a bit of race war and some changes by 2002 by the time you came down here, and then you came to good old.
Right, but there was a neighborhood at the time that the price point was kept at to keep people out.
Yeah.
And I remember one time, it was an interesting story. I picked up this call. It was the lady called, and she's selling her mom's house in this particular neighborhood. And so I told her, I would list it, and we met up. And I would, I'm white, I'm black, she's white, and so we got the house sold. But I remember, because not this particular neighborhood did not have minorities listing properties.
You were one of the first.
And at this time, it wasn't as advanced as like now. You can just call the service. Mm-hmm. And because she had her belongings in there, I would have to meet them every time. And I remember this one agent, when I opened the door, he looked at me and he said, "How did you get this listing?" Mm-hmm. Like, you're not supposed to have this listing. And then he said, "I think I know the owners, and if you can give me their phone numbers." And I looked at him like, what kind of fool do I look like?
So how'd you come up against those limiting beliefs? How did you get
the story gets even more interesting. And I didn't really have those limiting beliefs until I got to Texas.
Okay.
We had sold the property, gonna sell it, and I just dealt with the daughter. And then she called me to let me know that her mom was coming, because
her mom had never met you,
and her mom didn't know I was black, and her mom had a history of saying things inappropriately about other races. Mm-hmm. But she had one black friend that her mom liked, so and she said, "My mom doesn't know that you're black." I said, "Well, it is not going to change.
No,
because when I'll be black again tomorrow."
Right.
I don't know how you gonna work that out, because that seems like that's gonna be your problem,
not mine.
That is not mine. I was commissioned to do a job, and I have done it. Mm-hmm. I would be glad to meet your mother. She said, "Well, I don't know what she's gonna say." I said, "I don't know what I'm gonna say if she says something mm-hmm. inappropriate." And she was really nervous. I was not. Mm-hmm. It turned out well. Actually, her mother gave me some antique dishes that were gold plated. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it turned out, really well. But, as I look back over, she was like, "I don't know what she's going to say." I was like, "Well, I'll be black again tomorrow."
Yeah. This is gonna happen.
We gotta, you better talk to her. Mm-hmm. And so, and that went well. But when I moved here, and I have family here, and my aunts and uncles lived in Fort Worth, so Texas wasn't new. Right. But in my mindset, it was new to me with relations to being a southern state. And, if you've lived in Los Angeles, you kind of know who's who. I mean, it's very clear who don't like you and who does. So when you move to a new place, and you're trying to maneuver, and I worked, I was at this real estate company, and I had two particular agents come to me and say, "You would do really well in the black community." And I don't think they meant harm by it, but it was a very ignorant statement. And then another one said it, and so I was like, "Well, where is the black community, first of all?" Right? And it took me a couple of years. It took me a long time to move past that. And my broker at the time, his wife said, "Listen, everybody has a thing, okay? Your thing is that you just happen to be black, but you're intelligent, you're well spoken, you know how to sell,
You're personable.
and you know what you're
You
doing.
hustle.
And I think that after that, she recommended a book like Feel the Fear, Do It Anyway. And but that was a mindset. And so when you talk back to, how can we move forward with that conversation, a lot of people have limiting beliefs because either something has happened to them or something has happened to someone in their family, like people who don't like the police.
Right.
um and we saw kids like that.
Yeah.
Not necessarily happen to them, but they may have seen their parents get
Cousin
arrested
or a brother
or something to that effect.
Yeah.
And so in their mind, they don't like the
They
police.
don't like them.
Not the good police, not the but no police.
None of them.
Right. And so it is something that you have to work on. It took me a while, and then it kind of was like, well, I didn't have all black clients in Los Angeles, so why do I have to have all black clients here?
Right. Because I'm good. I'm good for everybody. Because I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm going to sell your house.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. So that conversation in the limiting beliefs, how can we all push through? Because we all have limiting beliefs, every single one of us. I mean, we're all vulnerable in there because we've all been told we're stupid. We've all been told this, or you can't do this, you can't do that.
Or you're not this, or you're not enough.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I've been divorced almost 9 years, and so it's just like, yeah, I want to be in a relationship, but and then it's something. It's like, yeah, I want to be in a relationship, and then there's like, oh, when I go home and chill, and but I'll just hang out with the dog because I don't want to be vulnerable. Or if
because you have to open up a part of yourself, and a lot of part of yourself, because there are so many things that after 10 years of marriage, and it almost killed me and Jeremy's marriage, because I hadn't opened up to him about my past and what had been done to me and what had happened to me. And so all that anger and all that resentment and all that ugliness just kind of just stayed there. And it was projecting on a man who truly loved me.
Mm-hmm.
No matter
like, what's wrong with this girl?
Right, what's wrong with her?
Yeah.
Which is what can happen just out in the real world. All that anger, all that resentment, all that ugliness that has been pushed towards
the baggage.
It's the baggage. So how do we handle that baggage, and how do we help each other get through it and heal?
Well, I think that first, we as ourselves have to look at how we project ourselves on other people.
True.
And then the other thing is, being vulnerable to say you hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't feel good. And be ready for, because some people, if you say you hurt my feelings or whatever, their defense mechanism comes up and they're not willing to say, to acknowledge that, that they hurt you or what have you. And see, some people, they see me and they think, oh, I'm tough as nails. Girl, I will cry at the drop of a hat, okay?
I cry at Disney movies and Hallmark commercials. But Jeremy's friends are scared of me. They're like, your wife is tough. He was like, yeah, she is. But she'll cry at the drop of a hat at a Disney movie.
It's just, I'm very, and I think that's just a guard.
It is.
And I think it's a guard we all have.
It is.
Because we're protecting ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I call it Fort Knox.
It is.
I got Fort Knox around me. And so then, you have to, and I just use dating as an analogy. Okay, you gotta let the windows down so some people can see.
Yeah.
And it's scary.
It is scary. It is scary.
It's scary. Because it's like, this might not. Okay, but I gotta put myself out there.
We have to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where we're at right now is we've all got to put ourselves out there. Mm-hmm. We've all got to make that phone call and all have to have these difficult conversations like Jeremy and Trevor got to have and be open to being vulnerable.
And say, listen, I don't know what your experience is like.
Right.
Because I can't even fathom living that way. But I'm here for you.
Right. That's
whatever you need,
Mm-hmm.
whatever you want me to do.
Mm-hmm.
I got a text message from a friend the other day, and she said, "I'm thinking about you. Um, with everything that's going on, and how can I help you at this
Mm-hmm.
time?" And I said, "I really appreciate you reaching out to me. I don't even know how to answer that question.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know what to say." Not sarcastically, but it was like, and I was like, "What did you bring me a casserole?" I mean, I don't know.
Chocolate.
Yeah, I mean, wine. Yeah, I mean, I honestly, but I said, in instances that be there. I know you don't understand what it is to live this kind of life, but just you being there
Mm-hmm.
and available. I'm not gonna dump on you,
Right.
but and just do a little homework to understand.
That's the other one too. Is I started doing something else at the Team Impact program, and I'm missing them right now. It's killing me with this COVID
Oh,
stuff. I started doing something at the very beginning where we talk about perception, and I want to pull down the walls because the perception of us from the kids to us, the volunteers, because we're hard on at the very beginning.
Oh,
We make
yeah.
them stand in norms. We tell them to take their earrings out, their rings off. I mean, we're tough as nails. At the
remember
very
what
beginning.
I used to do when I found out they were
They
stealing?
took their shoes and their glasses. Oh, I would die.
Oh, you steal?
You steal?
Give me your shoes.
Especially if they had expensive ones on. And so I talk about, and we sit them down, and it's fun because we've got all these volunteers, and we always mess with Jeremy because Jeremy's the one that gets the biggest
Right.
perception around him. And I was like, well, let's talk about perception. Let's talk about what you think we think of you guys.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think we see you walking in here? And they're like, bad kids, bad juveniles, bad seeds. We're just, horrible people, and they have all of these thoughts of coming in and never met us before, but they are already thinking of how we think about them.
Well, it's the same thing with race.
It is. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
And so we're all going through here. I'm walking in a room and I'm like, the last thing I want is a black man to fear that a white woman just walked in the room and we're alone together, or walking into an elevator. So I'm going to smile. I'm going to say hi.
Right.
I'm going to ask how he's doing today because I don't want him to feel fearful that he's got to leave and be late for an important meeting.
Because that's the narrative that's been
That's the narrative that's been put out.
But remember when we first started doing when I first started coming, remember when all the guys used to come on their motorcycles dressed in leather?
Mm-hmm.
And how intimidating that was. And it used to crack me up because I would say, all these dudes got jobs, big time, like corporate
and they're
jobs.
all big teddy bears.
Yeah, but the perception of the kids who saw them was like they were big bad bikers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what used to crack me up to myself, like, these kids really think these dudes are bad.
Well, and I walk in and they look at me and I start saying, what's your perception of us volunteers? So they look at me and they think that I've had an amazing life, that I've never gotten in trouble. They think I've had it, easy. And I was like, I'm dyslexic. I said, I got involved with drugs. I said, I've probably done more drugs than all 15 of y'all in one row. And they're like, their jaws drop to the floor. And they're like, what? So we've got, I love using that perception thing because it kind of drops that curtain. I use it as kind of like a warm up or what do you want to call it? Just something where we can just make fun of each other and go
be
back
relatable.
And be relatable. Because that's the only way that we're going to get them to open up.
Well, how would I have known? As long as we've known each other. Then we were talking the other day, and you were bused to an inner city school, and I was bused out of the inner city to a different school. We've had the same experiences, but opposite.
The opposite. And
I don't think we talk enough, honestly.
No.
I don't think people talk enough.
I think we're getting pictures and flashes on social
which tell
media.
A very small story.
It's a highlight reel.
And it's framed to make you believe whatever it is they want you to believe.
Instead of sitting down and having that real conversation and that face-to-face communication. We've lost that. And you and I talk about that all the time. We've lost
a lot of that.
And I think a lot of not everything would be solved, because I don't think the racism will ever be completely solved.
Right.
I just hope this allows that bad behavior to start being brought out,
Mm-hmm.
and that bad behavior to not be rewarded anymore.
Right. Right. And I think that's where we have to, when we're pushing the ball, when we get in the room,
Mm-hmm.
those are issues that we have to address locally, statewide, and federally to, number one, elect representatives who will have our interests, especially when it comes to
Yep.
this kind of thing. Because what we're seeing is a lot of bad behavior right
A
now.
lot of bad behavior. Well, and then I'm sitting in a room, and I'm sitting here fearing for my job, but I hear bad behavior over here, and I can't say, "Excuse me,
Yeah.
that was ugly."
Yeah.
Did,
Yeah.
did,
Yeah.
but here I am.
Yeah.
If I say anything, I'm going to lose my job.
Right.
Or
There's something terribly wrong with that.
Very wrong. Very wrong. That I'm afraid to speak up for my minority friends because I'm scared I'm going to lose my job.
Wow. That's a big risk to take.
It's a big risk to take when you've got bills.
Mm-hmm.
And
then we're scared to speak up because we may lose our jobs for speaking up. It's just a big ball of confusion.
It is a big ball of confusion. It's a huge ball. So we've got to give people the room to speak up.
Mm-hmm.
And when they do, we've got to listen and do something about it.
But I think people stop caring. I think that people are so absorbed in money. It's about the bottom line for them. They don't care about feelings and all that other stuff.
For our corporations, that's not with Disney Institute. We would have corporations that would come and say, we need help with our customer service. Our customers aren't happy. We're seeing survey after survey after survey. And so then we go and we interview the employees. The employees are unhappy. So then I go over to the leaders and I ask some of the questions of the leaders. The leaders are clueless.
Right.
They think everybody's happy because they've got the bottom line and they've got money.
Right.
So, and I'm like, do you know that your people are unhappy? What are you doing to help your people be happy so they can make the customers happy?
Mm-hmm.
It's a vicious cycle. It's the leadership in this country. It's the leadership in our corporate America. It's the leadership in our communities that keep rewarding bad behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And if we keep rewarding that bad behavior and we don't lift up the people that are doing good,
mm-hmm.
which is what we see on the media all the time, if it bleeds, it leads, we're never going to see anything different.
I agree.
Ever. Well, I love you.
I love you too.
And I was getting some tissue because I didn't know how emotional, but I'm kind of glad we didn't get too emotional.
I think we covered some ground.
I think, and we probably have more podcasts to add to this.
I'm down
later. But I want to thank you. So tell us about your real estate business. I'm going to put links on my YouTube channel and on my podcast stuffs to make sure that we can get the word out, because you are an amazing realtor, so I just want to get the word out to everybody.
Blackjack Realty Group, brokered by Texas Realty Exchange. Right here in the DFW. Yeah, Cheryl English. Is it CherylEnglish.com? I don't know. I think so.
You can find
I'll get it.
You'll find it.
I'll get it
so I
to
can
you.
put the link out.
Yeah, because I just switched companies and still getting stuff done. But this was a good conversation.
It was. I think it was a real good conversation. Yeah. And I appreciate you coming. I really do.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Anytime, girl. I got you. I got you.
And I got your book.
Yay! I'm so excited. I'm so very excited.
I kind of feel like there's going to be a part 2 to this.
Yeah.
I totally feel it.
There's a lot in that book.
Yeah.
But there's not everything. So.
Well, thank God for the podcast.
Right?
Yes.
Because then that's where a lot of the stuff gets out too. I think there's a lot more that I want to help the community with, and impact is a big part of it. And struggling with my dad's Alzheimer's and everything else. It's just been rough.
He looks good though.
He does look good, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He's cute patootie. He was a hot fireman. I got him on account. So think about me. I'm in high school. Here, we'll stop this. I'm in high school. And
Bye.
Bye. Have a good day, and y'all be sweet. Thank you so much for tuning into my podcast, Be the Hero and Rescue Yourself with Kelly Fullman. If you enjoyed listening to my podcast or watching this YouTube video, please follow or subscribe to my channel and walk with me through my journey of celebrating my very own heroes and an opportunity to learn the valuable lessons they taught me over the years. which allowed me to gain the courage to wear my very own cape and be the hero of my life. You can also follow me on Instagram at K Fullman, that's KFUHLMAN, at Facebook, /K Fullman1, or on LinkedIn, Kelly Fullman MBA. Also, please leave your comments below because I see feedback as a gift and it will guide me on how to help you gain the courage you need to rescue yourself. Be sweet, y'all. Thanks.